Okay, so I know this is gonna be a hot take, especially after my CX-50 review, and I still really enjoyed this car. But hear me out, this car really influenced me over the past week. Unfortunately, the CX-5 does lack some features that its brother in size, the CX-50, offers, but I think I still like it more. Let me explain. I will say the CX-5 and the CX-50 are two different cars. The CX-50 is supposed to be more rugged and more country bound, while also being luxurious, while the CX-5 is supposed to be a more urban dweller. This CX-5 in particular is a 2023 Turbo Signature, so it's the top trim, in deep crystal blue paint. I actually really like this color. It's a very pretty spec, especially with these wheels. The MSRP of this one in particular is right at $40,000, so for a top trim, now compact, I know these cars are big, but for a top trim crossover like this, even in top spec Honda CR-V and Toyota RAV4, 40 grand is not that bad for what you get. So since the signature trim is supposed to be a more luxurious and sophisticated spec of the CX-5, you get all painted lower body cladding, which looks so much better, and it really classes this thing up. My only minor gripe about the looks of this is this front lip. It just sticks out a little bit too much for me, giving this only 17 degrees of approach angle. I know this isn't an off-roady crossover, but it just looks a little bit funky to me. One way to combat that is lowering this. These look really good lowered. Mazda really seems to have perfected the car for everyone, because the CX-5 has 8 different trim levels. 2.5S, 2.5S Select, 2.5S Preferred, 2.5S Carbon Edition, 2.5S Premium, 2.5S Premium Plus, 2.5 Turbo, and 2.5 Turbo Signature, just like this one. If a loaded signature trim like this one isn't really your style, Mazda's base 2.5S starts at right around $26,000. Thankfully, Mazda offers a few different flavors of wheel design depending on what trim level you get. Lower trims like the 2.5S will start off with a 17-inch alloy wheel. Mid-levels like the Premium and Premium Plus will get an 18-inch alloy wheel, and the turbo models will get 19s. The Signature has the 19s in a brushed aluminum trim, and the base turbo has black 19s. Also, I was looking at this head on, and the tires look skinny. They're only 225s, but if you think about it, this is not a performance SUV. It's supposed to be comfortable and reasonably fuel efficient. 225 is perfectly fine. The CX-50 offers 245s. Thankfully, unlike a lot of its competitors like the Honda CR-V, the CX-5 offers a more powerful engine option. This uses a 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. I almost said 5-cylinder because of Volvo. The base CX-5s also use a 2.5 4-cylinder, but it just doesn't have a turbo. This engine with 87 octane regular gas makes 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Those alone are really good numbers, especially compared to some of its competition. If you put 93 or premium gas in this, it makes 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. You kind of notice the difference. It's a fun to drive SUV. This is paired to a 6-speed automatic transmission, which is low for the times, but Mazda is finally adding a new transmission in the CX-90 with more gears. But this isn't that bad. Mazda claims 22 in the city, 27 on the highway, and a combined rating of 24. I've been enjoying myself driving this, so I've been getting about 21, so that's not that far off. But to me though, this powertrain really fits the best in the CX-5, even better than the Mazda 3 Turbo. This uses Mazda's iACTIV all-wheel drive. I would take this off-road, but why would, there's no point to me. If you want to see a Mazda go off-road, sometime in the next few months, I should be taking a CX-50 off-road, and we shall see how that does. But those two essentially use the same all-wheel drive system. It's primarily front-wheel drive, but it can send up to 50% of power to the rear axle, and its traction control system is pretty advanced for being a car. Speaking of the CX-50, this is also where things start to overlap. One thing that this shares with the CX-50 is the lack of a hands-free power tailgate. That's one of the things I noticed. That lady's talking loud. Trunk space is pretty decent back here, but behind the second row with the seats up, it's actually a little bit smaller than the CX-50. You get 29 cubic feet in this, while the CX-50 gives you 31 cubic feet of volume. But if you fold the 40-20-40 split rear seat down, you get 59 cubic feet of volume, while the CX-50 only gives you 56. This is actually pretty practical because over the weekend I fit a 6-drawer IKEA mom dresser, pretty big dresser, with the second row seat down. It can fit here with 2 people up front. That's not that bad. There's a spare tire underneath, and this little floor is, well, not removable, but it has 2 height settings. You can do it up here like normal, and you can also drop it a bit if it'll cooperate. If you will cooperate, you can drop it a bit and get like another inch of height back here. One thing that really impressed me before I even got in is how wide the door opens. It's almost like a 90-degree angle. Step-in height is pretty good because this has about 8 inches of ground clearance. I'm 5'9", and the driver's seat is in my position how I sit when I drive, and my feet can fit, damn it, I did this again. My feet can fit all the way under the seat. I also like that there's footwell lighting in here. That's a nice touch. I have decent legroom. Headroom is good because this doesn't have a pano moonroof. The CX-50 gets one, but not the CX-5. The rear seat itself is pretty comfortable. The bottom of the seat is a little bit firm, but it's nothing I would complain about. The rear seats can also recline, so you see how I'm sitting like this. Now, nope, there we go. I'm a little bit more reclined. In terms of creature comforts, there's air vents in the back, but no third climate control zone. That's not something I would expect. And something that's hidden, if you fold down this armrest, is 2 cup holders, which are reasonable, but you know, rear seat cup holders are usually shallow. But the outboard rear seats are heated. There's 3 levels for them, but I'd honestly never find them here. And if you open this little console over here, which could fit a phone, there's 2 2.1 amp USB ports. That's something to double check because I think it would be better if the plugs were down here and the buttons for the heated seats were like on the doors. Just a little bit easier to find. Now, I know this is nothing sporty or crazy, but this is a driver's SUV, especially compared to a lot of the cars that this competes with. But first, this is the key fob for these newer Mazdas. It reminds me of the new Volvos. I really think Mazda's done a good job with making this interior feel and look premium. Everything that you touch is soft touch and nice quality. Again, you have that wood trim over here and all the brushed aluminum trim. It's all a nice package. The steering wheel is 3-spoked and leather wrapped. It is also heated, but annoyingly, it's only the 9-3 grips that are heated. There's also paddle shifters behind the wheel, and there's also a few buttons on the wheel itself. The left side controls some of the Bluetooth and audio controls, and it also cycles through the menu in the gauges, and the right side controls most of the cruise control functions. I quite like the gauges of this. You could call it a little bit dated compared to the full LCD gauges in other cars, but it doesn't really bother me. I believe it's a 7-inch display. If you push the info button, it doesn't really cycle through much, mostly just the trip computer, service interval, and the compass, but there's not much configuration in this. It does kind of change color with the drive mode that you're in. Normal mode doesn't really do anything. Sport mode turns the gauges red, and off-road mode turns the gauges brown. Now we can talk about the infotainment, which is kind of a hot topic in these Mazdas. I actually don't mind the infotainment system in this. It's pretty simple, so there's not many ways to get lost in here, and the rotary dial is pretty simple to use, especially while you're driving. This is annoyingly not a touchscreen. The CX-50 gets a touchscreen, but it's only a touchscreen in park. That in itself is a bit of an annoyance because, like in this, the screen is so close I could touch it. But there's not that much in here. This does wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but this does not support wireless Apple CarPlay. The CX-50 does though. There's also a 360 view camera if you put the thing into reverse, and also if you push the view button. And it has a wide view for the backup camera and a normal view, and the 360 camera itself is very good quality. In drive, it can also show you what I call a curb view because you're really not going to be taking this off-road, so that's very useful as well. You have dual zone climate control, and I really appreciate that the buttons are hard touch and not embedded into the screen because it's really annoying. Have to change the mode, you know, and the fan direction in a screen. I also want to talk about the seats. You may think that they're black right now, but they're actually brown. It's called Katura brown. Personally, if I could choose a shade of brown, I'd go for something lighter like a caramel. The seats themselves are pretty comfortable. I've driven this car on a few little road trips here and there, and I've had no back problems. They're also heated and cooled, and I can actually say cooled because they cool really well. The seats are also pretty supportive, and the driver's seat is an 8-way power seat with 2-person memory for the seat and the mirrors, but the steering column is manually adjusting. There's also 2 reasonably sized cup holders. The armrest is pretty soft, and if you open it up, there's this little tray here, which I've put my wallet in here, but there's 2 USB ports and a 12-volt power outlet. And the storage in here is on the small side, but it'll do. And like I said, you unfortunately can't get a CX-5 with a panoramic sunroof, but you can get one in the CX-50, so that's a point to that. Really, since the day this was dropped off to my house, I've kind of been in love with this car. Not enough to buy it, but I really like it. The ride is really smooth, the steering, everything just feels so well designed, and the power is something great. Even though this isn't a sporty car in itself, it's still fun to boogie this thing. Wow, so it does push. You can feel, this feels front-wheel drive. The CX-50 handles a little bit better than this at the limit. The steering has nice feel. It's very communicative, it's very linear. The power is also very linear as well. I love this 2.5. I mean, this is not the type of car to be driving like this, of course. The paddles are actually pretty responsive too. But yeah, if you drive this in an aggressive manner, you'll start to see that it's really not designed to be like this, well, driven like this. Especially the Mazda 3, it really feels like that. Let's blast. There's some torque steer, but again, like I was saying, if you start to really try to push this thing to the limits, you'll feel the body roll, which isn't that bad. I mean, this really handles much better than something like a CR-V. It's just much more of a driver's car. But this car is much more enjoyable if you're driving it more normally, because the brakes are good, but not sporty good. You'll really start to feel the brakes won't keep up with the engine, if that makes sense. The car is too fast for the brakes in a sporty mindset. So this car really, I've not really put it in sport mode. I'd much rather leave it in normal mode and just enjoy the drive. Let's also drive like I'm in Russia. I mean, this is an empty road. See how the turning circle is. The turning circle is pretty decent as well. But the power, first you can see the road's pretty bumpy, and I'm actually enjoying the ride. Like, the car is quick and the brakes are good, but if you're really banging down a back road, this is not the type of car to be doing that. Even a CX-50. The Mazda 3 hatch with the turbo also feels pretty similar to this as well. Throttle response is great. The engine has a bit of a growl to it, which I like. I really like this car. Like, this is the most enjoyable of these little crossovers to me. Around town and driving this thing normally, the steering is pretty good. But again, once you start pushing it, it's not like it loses its sense of confidence, but it's not as tight and direct as you would desire. But this is not a Mazda Speed CX-5. This is just a Mazda CX-5 Turbo. From a stop, this thing will... Wow! From a stop, this is all-wheel drive, but it still lets the front tires get loose. It's funny. But the torque is great. One of my favorite parts of driving this is getting on the highway. Merging and passing power, phenomenal. This, and I'm sure a lot of the other cars in its competition, really just encourage cruising. And this is the most fun at cruising on a back road. Like, it'll take all the turns well. It's independent suspension, front and rear. The CX-50 uses a torsion bar or torsion beam in the back, which isn't as dynamic as independent suspension, but it's still decent. Like, really, if someone asks me for a non-hybrid SUV in this size, I will always say CX-5. As much as I'm a Honda and Toyota guy, CX-5 is really good. I would drive one. It's really good. Interesting fact, because I see a first-gen Mazda Tribute. Those were supposed to be called the CX-5 before they came out with the Tribute name. Piece of shit. So I guess to wrap up my thoughts, really it comes down to you if a CX-50 or a CX-5 is a better choice. I think in town, a CX-5 really suited my needs. I could see myself driving this, however, I'm not in the market for something that's only road going. The only downside to me about a CX-50 is that a Meridian trim, which is the off-roady rugged trim level, isn't any taller than a normal CX-50, so you'd have to lift it immediately, but that's a whole other video. I actually like this more than the Mazda 3 turbo hatch. Again, it just feels much more balanced and the powertrain really feels like it fits in this car. But enough of me talking about Mazdas. Thank you for watching this video of this 2023 Mazda CX-5. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, week, morning, night, afternoon, whatever. I'm gonna go on another tangent. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, peeps.